Hey, good morning, everybody. I'd like to call today's Judicial and Public Safety Committee to order. It is Thursday, June 12th, 2025. May I please have roll call?
Gripe,
Right here.
Gums, Linder,
Linder here.
Pepe,
Tepe here.
Williams, Leonard,
Leonard here.
Molina,
Molina present.
Roth.
Out here.
Synchro.
Okay, and we have a remote attendance request from Ms. Gums. I don't see her online yet, but do I have consent for allowing her to remote into the meeting? Okay, consent was granted. I'll request unanimous consent for approval of minutes of May 15th.
So requested.
Hearing and seeing no objections, minutes are approved. Public comment, we have nobody signed up in writing for public comment. And our monthly financial reports are on file. So we will move straight to Merit Commission. We have our chairman here.
We do.
Take your time, Pete.
Madam Chair,
Nice to see you.
when could we ask questions about the financial report?
They're on file. I don't have anybody here from finance, but if you have a question, you can go ahead and ask.
Okay, if I may. So one of the things we've been having finance help us with, that's a bunch of us, is breaking down the interest income that is allocated to each department. I mean, it's a lot of money when you look at what it is. So my question is, if you look at the reports, and I can give you the page, it's page 4. So Blair, I don't know if you want to bring that up as a for instance, but, and I don't need this answered now, but my questions are, is this money budgeted? Because the interest income varies each year. So how do the departments budget it? And is it allocated to each area? And who, if so, who does that? And then if it's not used, what happens to it at the end of the year? Because like I said, this is a boatload of money when you look at it across the county. So I don't need to have those answers now, but if somebody knows, great. Otherwise, if somebody could email the board with a response on that, that would be great. Just on this page alone, there's probably almost 25,000.
Yeah,
And,
Mr. Grape, I'd recommend you email Ms. Hopkinson with those questions because each, as you're aware, each department and each elected official has their own funding and they're each allocated interest based on whatever grants or whatever they have in their budget. So the question is going to be different for each department.
So you're saying that Ms. Hopkinson determines how much each department gets?
I'm saying she can give you an answer as to which department is what and whether or not that interest remains in that department or whether or not that interest can be sent over to the general fund. And then you can speak to each individual group. We're going to have a budget meeting next month, I believe. The committee will be reviewing the budgets for each department. So you're asking that question now, so they'll be prepared to answer that in public next meeting. But Ms. Hopkinson should be able to give you a better answer to kind of just
I'd be glad to do that. I'm just curious if anybody in this room knows anything about that from any of the departments.
Like I said, each department is different. If anybody's comfortable answering that, they can. Otherwise, we can wait for next month.
I can tell you. So, I mean, we have a tiny amount. We have a volunteer fund that maybe has $35,000 in it. Comes from donations that groups make for the volunteers, and it earns interest probably less than $1,000 a year. And I think it's deposited back into the account.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for the response. This is the interest income that I'm seeing here should be from the money that the county holds, and the interest that's accrued on it, because it's a lot of money, is passed out in some way, shape, or form. And I'm curious to what extent the departments get involved in budgeting it, allocating it, spending it, returning it. And that's probably going to be a different answer for every single department.
Yeah. So
In the biggest general fund taker, I would say that we have no say in all of the revenue that we incur and the interest therefrom. All goes to finance or the treasurer's office, and then silence. So there's not a whole lot of transparency and communication with us.
yeah, let's, I
Thanks,
think
John.
this is a big question, Mr. Roth, if you wanted to chime
Well,
in,
I
but-
mean, Kathy has presented that over the last few years. There's a lot of special funds
you know, like certain departments. And so that's their money. We can't, the general can't take it. And so, but she has reported on the year, and yeah, it's tight control. You know, we make sure that we don't steal from Peter or Paul or circuit court or, you know, whatever.
Lisa, do you want to-
Anything we can take for general goes to general.
Ms. Ost, go ahead.
Yeah, I will echo what Mr. Ross said. So the funds that we're earning interest on are special funds and they have a balance. Like the sheriff said, like we're not informed how much of the interest we're going to be accruing, but each special fund is allowed by a statute. And that statute within it states what happens to that interest if we keep it, if it goes back to the county, and what we can spend it on. So you're right, it's a very complex answer and it almost needs to be done on a fund by fund basis.
Exactly.
So I think that'll be what Mr. Gripe, what our request will be for the budget allocations for this year is to make sure, and I believe it is every year. We just have to highlight it. Yes.
We last tested for corrections in January, supplied the sheriff a list of 24 names. There's probably 2 names left on that list, so we're going to have to test again July 30th. As I speak, we have 10 applications. The deadline for submitting the applications will be July 24th. I anticipate 60 to 70 applicants, I hope. Again, we're using Wabansi is allowing us to use one of their rooms for testing at no cost, so that's a savior. But even when we test in July, I'm sure we'll be testing again this year. Neither the July test or the winter test are in our budget, but we'll worry about that at budget time. So that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for our Merit Commission at this time? Okay, nice seeing you. Thank you for being here. Okay, we'll move on to KingCom. Ms. Guthrie.
Good morning. Our reports are on file. I do want to recognize a couple of our employees and their anniversaries. Telecommunicator Mary Keating celebrated 12 years. Becca Shopey celebrated 11 years. And then Adam Holt in June just celebrated 20 years with them. So we thank them for their commitment and years of service. We are very, very, very focused on the hiring process. So we have testing scheduled for the end of June. Our testing group is up to 25 applicants, which is great. So we will continue that process. I don't have any slides today. I've brought pictures before in the past, but our biggest opportunity, our biggest need is space. We still have people sharing offices. And as I talk about hiring so many new employees, we really don't have an effective place to train them. So we continue exploring creative solutions. We're open to any and all suggestions. You know, my office may have to, again, be converted into, you know, a training space for employees, but we're still talking about that. So I just want to bring that to the committee because that's our largest area of opportunity right now. And that's all I have this morning.
Thank you, Director. Any questions for our Director, Mr. Gripe?
It's not a question, but maybe a ray of hope at administration yesterday. There was a discussion and buildings and maintenance talked about places that may be available that are full of stuff that we may be able to clear out and create space. I don't know who gets it, but so that's being looked at, which is a good thing. So look for garage sales soon.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, we will move on to emergency management.
Good morning. You've had our reports, but the main things I wanted to talk about, there's 3 in the presentation. There's a disaster recovery group, an update on the process that we're looking at for our mass communication system. That's one of the committee goals, is to look at that. And then I'm going to finish up with an update on our new command vehicle that's being built right now. So if we can get that presentation up. So the working title, disaster recovery committee concept, the working title is Disaster Ready Cane. Next slide. Okay, so what a disaster recovery committee is basically to deal with the aftermath of a disaster. To be honest, these are the things that keep me up at night. We're really good at responding to emergencies and disasters, but helping lots and lots of people after disaster is difficult because where do you get those resources and the untapped resources in our county? So we've in our experience working with sheltering, we have churches all over the place. They virtually all want to help. And this is one mechanism to provide them that opportunity. So it's really short-term and long-term needs. So when people are displaced from homes, it's short-term sheltering, providing feeding and stuff, and then also long-term needs to get people back to a sense of normalcy. Next slide. And I'll note, so everyone's aware we had that Batavia microburst that was a small scale, important to the people that it hit, but overall it wasn't a big lift. But something like this group could have helped them with cleanup and stuff like that. We also have, we have apartment fires in Aurora and Elgin somewhat frequently, and these kind of things could help with something like that too. So these are the kind of the functions of a disaster recovery group. Mass care, emergency temporary sheltering is one of them. Damage assessment, debris removal, and more so with helping people remove debris. Usually the local public works or township will clear that stuff from the curb. But one of the challenges is, and even the smaller storms that we've had, when trees get knocked down, those are typically not covered by insurance. So people, if you live in an area that has a lot of mature trees, like Campton Hills area and some of those, it's thousands of dollars to clean up a bunch of trees that got knocked down. So a group like this could be an army of people with chainsaws to help clean that up. Emotional, spiritual care, volunteer coordination, and spontaneous volunteers to manage those people that show up. I want to help. That's something that we could do. And then managing donations, which is something when you have a big disaster, people show up and they want to give stuff, and they go in their basement and they pull out some old clothes they were going to donate. And that becomes another disaster in managing all of that stuff. So this group can help manage that, and then fundraising and public outreach. Slide. So what we've been doing is we've been having conversations with a bunch of different groups. We're at the point of having a leadership meeting. We've identified some possible co-chairs, a vice chair, and a fiscal agent. So Mr. Gripe has stepped up, as long as with Mr. Penesis, to help in some way at organizing this. And we have a leadership meeting scheduled July 15th. We're going to then have a larger group meeting in August that will be a bunch of the organizations that already exist around Kane County. Will County is a little bit ahead of us. They've been at this for about a year. And so all of these groups, you could name them in around the county. They do some of these various things. We would be tapping into their knowledge, for instance, on sheltering. There's groups already that do that. We're just tapping into their knowledge and lining them up to help us in a disaster. So next slide. So any questions about, or just stop me if you have questions.
Any questions so far? Okay.
Good.
Go ahead.
Right. So I want to talk about mass notification now. You can go to the next slide. Our current platform is Code Red. We've had this for just about 20 years. This year we paid just over $37,000 for it. The money comes from the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund. The contract expires this December, but if we're going to cancel, we have to let them know by August 18th. So I've spent some time looking at this. About a year ago, we were looking at some other options that were significantly more expensive. And I read the room, and I wasn't prepared to show up and say, I need $100,000 for this. We weren't using it that well anyway. And so we spent the year trying to use it better, trying to make it better for us. And what we keep running into is it's just not that good. We're running into old data, and it's just hard to work with the company. You can go to the next slide. So this is our public opt-in database. This is people who have signed up. And so what we found is it's very, very outdated. And if the system was great, we would just say, let's do a campaign to get people to sign up and get better, more recent data. But when we do send a message, we have a very low success rate. And if you look at how many phone numbers are in the database versus how many text and email, it just tells you there's some numbers in there that are probably landlines from 20 years ago. And when we do send a message, we get about 20 to 40 angry messages I haven't lived in Kane County in 15 years. Why are you contacting me? And all those kinds of things. So it's bad data that we need to update. Next slide. This is our usage. So I have the 5-year average and then the 10-year average. So obviously 2020 was a big year. That's the biggest recent year. And in fact, in the whole 10 years. So we're using in the past 5 years, just over 15,000 voice minutes, a little less on the 10-year average. Next slide. And that was all usage. Our health department uses this a ton for internal messaging. They have monthly or weekly tests of their staff. And so those numbers are obviously that data is pretty accurate because they're keeping it up to date. These are just the attempted connections on only the external uses. So it's a lot of data there, but if you look at the yellow highlighted column, that's the success we're getting, connects versus non-connects. And it's a 28%. Last year was 17%. It changes year to year because it depends on what area of the county you target and how accurate that data is. So that's just how many good connections and how many did we not connect with. The orange highlighting is the connects compared to the attempts, because if you get a non-connect, it attempts it multiple times. So that's why those numbers are lower. But either way, we're not getting a very good connection rate. Next slide. So our experience with the current platform is they're hard to work with. Even when you ask for things, it's hard to do. We had a demo maybe 6 or 9 months ago. I know we had Under Sheriff Johnson on the call along with Julie Mann, because my intent was to try to get the sheriff's office and others the access to use it, and I wanted to show them. And I even told us, like, we are evaluating whether to keep this or not, and it was a horrible experience. I think they just think we're paying them $37,000 a year and they don't have to pay us much attention. And so in the last year, I've spent a lot of time trying to work on it from a internal messaging standpoint. So for all of our different departments, as we've looked at if an emergency happens in a building and we want to notify the staff, I've heard different numbers, 1,500 employees in the current system. I can have a big group and I can send a mass email, or a mass message. I may not want to bother people if the emergency only is involving this campus, and I don't want to send it to all the other people. So what we found is we can do those separate groups with our current system, but we have to upload it. So I'd have to take a spreadsheet of all the data and upload it. I don't have a way to send a link to each building and say, hey, if you're in this building and you want emergency, this link and sign up. And that makes it so we're going to have to manually update this, or I'm going to have to get from somebody a new list every time that there's changes in employees. And we know that's happening, a lot. So we've been looking at some alternatives, and the ones that are in bold, I think, are the most important one. iPause is how we have access and we're required by law to use this system. This is when we have severe weather and your phone goes off, you haven't signed up for notifications, but it goes off because the weather service submits a tornado warning and you're within the polygon and you get it if your cell phone is within that area, whether you signed up or not. And we have access to send messages. In fact, we're required to. So all those systems have that access. They all have internal groups. The two that we're looking at, HyperReach and Regroup, they have the internal groups where it's easy to sign up. I can send a link to all the staff and through HR or whoever, and they can then sign up for the link that to ones they want to know. It might be where they work. It also might be if they're somebody else, their spouse works in a different building and they want to know if there's an emergency in that building, so they could sign up for whatever they wanted to know. They all have public opt-in databases. One nice thing about the systems we're looking at is the public can change their data when it changes. But what we get is sometimes, especially elderly people who aren't as computer savvy, we get phone calls of, can you take me off this list or change my number? Because they don't know how to do it. These systems, when we get those calls, though I don't want to advertise it and have 10,000 people calling us to make those changes, we could make those changes if we had to. So. And another nice thing is both of the systems have the ability, we can send a message to staff and we can give them choices to put press 1 if this, press 2, press 3. For instance, if there was an emergency in a building and we had to evacuate and we need to locate them, you know, because what people were sick that day, what people were working from home, what people left early, what people were out to lunch when it happened. And that's a way that you can reach them and have them say, I wasn't at work, I'm safe, I'm at the hospital, whatever the case was. And then subgroup administrator. So if the sheriff's office wants to join in, or the health department, or any department that makes sense to be in this, we can give them a sub administrator role and they can manage their own people. And as well as send messages. So just looking real quick at costs, the costs, all of these costs are below what we're paying now. That's when we realize we could do this for less than we're paying. There's an opportunity here, and both of these systems are better than what we have. So these numbers are, this is usage that's way above what we're currently using. They're 345,000 and 500,000 minutes for either equal or less than what we're paying. So, but I also looked at a lesser usage, which is in line with what we're currently using. So they're significantly less. So regroup is, there's a first year cost, but then annual cost of 14,000, which is, it's actually double they do counts and not minutes. So, but it's equivalent to what we're doing. So we're paying 37,000, and the first year cost for both these other systems would be about 19,000. So, and then after that, then regroup would be about 14, hyperreach would be only 17.5. So next steps is we've offered to do some demos with some of the other groups, departments that might use it to get some input, and we'll plan to make a decision fairly quickly, and then we'll plan to bring this to committee starting in July so that we can get approval. I know it's below the 30,000 threshold, but this has been something that we've been talking about, so we're happy to, bring it here to discuss if needed. So any questions about any of that?
Thank you. Any questions for our director? Mr. Roth?
Scott, have you taken a look at the two you're looking at considering?
We've had demos with them with my staff.
Okay.
Now we're at the point of opening it up. So if any of the committee would like to jump onto that and sit in on those demos, I can send you the.
I would be interested, being an ex-IT guy. I can help you there.
Okay. We can send you those. I have some dates identified. All right. Then the last thing is just, I want to show you some pictures.
Scott, we have a couple more questions. Mr. Tepe?
Hi, good morning. Any database that's going to rely upon voluntary participation is going to be suspect. Okay.
Yep.
You're never going to keep it up to date. And when the people move, they're still not going to tell you. So it's just a matter of, you're going to have a new database and you're just going to have that same problem a few years from now. What is the problem if what you primarily relied upon was the notification through cellular phone based upon where you are?
That's the backup. We always have that in our back pocket. And I guess the advantage of having this, because in addition to the public opt-in database, they all have non-opt-in data, and they all get the data from the same places. There's a service that provides that. It's basically public phone data. So there's also that if we want to send a message to a larger group, we can access that, and all of these systems have that data. But in the end, in a true emergency, and iPause has to be for a true emergency, then we have that. But we're limited in how many. It's only I think I don't know if it's 140 or 240 characters. So there's a limit to that, and that is only 2 cell phones. But the other one, we can get to emails and texts and things like that too.
All right. believe me, I don't want to design this in a meeting like this. That'd be crazy. But to me, I would think you'd be handling some greater 90% of your situations by using that. And I'd suggest that you consider using that as your primary and maybe not even using some of these, but that would be, the data is going to get bad when you have voluntary participation.
Yes.
Very quick.
Yeah, we agree.
Mr. Roth, did you have a follow-up?
I did, and there again, there's a bunch of lawyers in here, so what I'm going to say is privacy, but the county clerk provides extracts of the voter rolls, and I'm not sure if the treasurer does, for mailing out the tax bills. And there again, it's optional, but you could at least maybe do a mailing occasionally to have people, hey, if you want to get on this list, and here's the reason why. It's more accurate because it does, especially tax bills.
Right.
We
I
try to
think-
keep
I
current
think with-
addresses.
We would probably do some of, with the current system, if it was more adequate, I think we would be doing those things to get the
Okay.
data more up to date. And I think once we have a better system, I think we can do those things to keep, a better set of data.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Okay, Scott, go
All
ahead.
right. So just to update on the mobile command vehicle, just, I know we have some board members that weren't here when all this was approved. This is the vehicle that it's replacing. It's a 2006 Winnebago. It's a one of a kind. The company that made this one, and they don't make any more. And the parts that make it operate don't exist anymore with the slide out and the leveling system. So when those break, there's no way to fix them anymore. And some of the jacks that they come down to level it, when there's one of them that doesn't want to go up, so we carry a floor jack to put it underneath. We pry it up and get the floor jack under there to give it some help to pull up. So this just so old that it's a challenge to keep running. So that was why we went after ARPA funds, and that's funding this vehicle that is now in production. We were there at the end of May, and it's been painted, and they're starting to put stuff together. You can see top left, the window is being cut in, and then there's where the generator and some of the power equipment was in there, and a storage container. And then the inside wasn't built yet, but that's going on now. They're wiring. They said it's something like 5 miles of cables are going into this thing. And that's what it'll look like when it's done. So that's all I have this morning.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Okay, with the committee's approval, our state's attorney Mosser has asked to go next. She's in the middle of her presentation, so Sheriff Payne, is that okay?
I have to be in court in 2 minutes, so I'm just going to bow out.
So no questions for the sheriff then? I'm so sorry, Sheriff. Thank you for being here. Okay. And Ms. Mosser. You're muted.
Good morning. Thank you.
Morning.
I have to do a presentation for Karina Villa's team on elder scams, so I have to get to that. I just have 2 resolutions today. If we wanted to go forward with that, I do not have a presentation.
Okay, go ahead and introduce your first one.
So our first resolution is just continuing something that we've done before, which is an agreement that we have for professional healthcare services with the Child Advocacy Center and the University of Illinois. So this is something we do every year.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve the resolution?
Linder will move.
Mr.
Gripe
Linder
second.
moves, Mr. Gripe seconds. Okay, any questions or comments regarding the resolution? Pretty straightforward. Okay, may I please have roll call?
Gripe,
Gripe, yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Tepe, Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, this passes. And then go ahead with your second one.
Thank you. Our second one is a budget adjustment from the King County Health Department to the State's Attorney's Office. This is to create a new position in my office for a crisis collaboration liaison. This is a person who will be working with police departments, social work agencies, and throughout all of King County to increase people's understanding of those individuals who are in mental health crisis. We want to make sure that people everywhere understand the different signs, what you can see. And then we also want to make sure that we have in Kane County the proper police response for people who are in mental health crisis. A person who just retired from the Elgin Police Department, Tony Regano, who was a lieutenant there and actually helped to create their crisis services unit, is going to be the person that's going to take this role. So he's very familiar with crisis intervention training, along with how to train police departments, social workers, and everyone on how to recognize these signs so that we'll have a much better response here in Kane County. He will also work with our collaborative diversion program to make sure that we can get this to every single police department within Kane County. So again, this is just a budget transfer to create this position.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve the resolution?
Linder will move.
Mr. Linder moves.
Gripe second.
Mr. Gripe seconds. Okay, discussion? Mr. Gripe.
Thanks for submitting this, Jamie. I'm curious, I think both your area and the health department have really good people and capabilities. And I think from what I've read and what I'm hearing, that this makes more sense in the state's attorney's office because of the links to law enforcement and things like that. So the health training part of it, if you will, the capability part of it, will fit well in your area. Am I kind of reading that right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And Ms. Mosser, because it's a transfer of funds, and the health department generally is completely funded by grants. Will this position then in your department also be funded by grants, or would you be looking to next year go into the general fund to fund the position?
My goal is to continue to sustain this with grants.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, may I please have roll call?
Gripe,
Gripe, yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Tuppy,
Pepe, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, and this passes on to finance next.
Okay.
Okay,
thank
any
you all.
questions for Ms. Mosser before she has to leave? Okay, thank you for jumping on. Okay, and then we will move to our coroner.
Good morning. Our report is on file and Dr. Silva's in training. So again, I'm here if anyone has any questions regarding our report.
Okay, any specific questions regarding our coroner's report? Okay, thank you for being here.
One thing I did want to mention, I would like to say thank you to board member Mavis Bates. She actually came into our office to have a tour and to talk with us. And during that time, we got called out and she went out on a scene with us and she was amazed at the involvement and the collaboration with the other departments with us. So I just wanted to thank her for doing that with us. Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Gripe?
That'd be interesting too, and the likelihood of us being there when you get called. What would the timing be if we said, hey, we'd love to go out on a call? Can you call us about that, or what? How would that work?
Absolutely. We actually had board member Roth as well as Gums do that. If you're interested in that, all I'll do is find out when you would like to go. I will take your number and 24/7, if you say if that's what you would like, I will call you. And if you want specific type of cases you want to go on or whatever you would like, you're welcome. Perfect.
Okay,
Mine was a very interesting one. I took me a half an hour to get there, but it didn't matter. It was, I won't go into details because it wasn't nice, but I was real impressed by the staff and how well of a job they do. So,
Thank you.
okay, seeing no other questions for our coroner, we'll move on to judiciary and courts. Javella here, good morning.
Is it on? No, okay, there it is. Good morning, everybody. Not much of a report right now. There are some things in progress. We are finally, I know Jason and Andrew will be happy to report this when the time comes, probably next month. Finally finishing the install of all the technology that went into the Judicial Center to have trial presentation materials as well as electronic recording from the state. It was a bit herding cats getting all the different departments together, but it seems to have moved along pretty well. They're going to finish up at 3rd Street in a couple of weeks, I think. About 7 weeks. That's a couple in my mind, I guess. I did see them pull in cable yesterday. I don't think the bill is going to be any stronger than it will be now with all the cable that's in our buildings. We have one other project that we did have a resolution on before that we're really excited about it. We have a 12-week timeline from our construction company that we're working with, MRRW, to put the security station into a reality at the 3rd Street Courthouse, working in conjunction with the Sheriff's Department to fund that. So I think that's going to be a really exciting thing to present to you in the future. One of the things that we have been able to do as judiciary is service the public remotely. I think that is an unrealized gain that Kane County was one of the first counties in the whole state to really do during COVID. But there is also a negativity to Zoom appearances for court. Access to justice for individuals is not something that law firms should then necessarily have been able to take advantage of, but they have. And there's a bit of a pushback from a lot of the chief judges and their contemporaries around the state to lawyers who think that Zoom is the way they should appear in court all the time because they can, that they often appear informally from their lake houses in polo shirts, acting as if they'd forgotten that they were lawyers appearing in court that day. So there, with all the technology that we've put in and the money that's been spent, I think there needs to be a focus on returning people back to the courthouse. Litigants who can't appear because they have childcare issues or something along those lines will always be accommodated. That's a foot we don't need to put on them. But lawyers are becoming lazy. Younger lawyers are becoming distant from one another. And for my remainder of the time as chief, I'd like to have some influence in returning people back to the courtrooms. There is, well, I'll just say this. There's always going to be a court call or two that benefits from remote hearings, like abuse and neglect. That's a court call that has really seen an increase in positive resolution of cases because their parents are able to appear more often and parties are able to appear more often as a whole. But litigation attorneys, divorce attorneys, people appearing generally from Chicago, not having to make their way out here or hire local counsel is a detriment to what we do out here. So you'll be hearing a lot of that from me and see some of that in the future as our technology gets online.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Judge, how do you enforce that?
So it's somewhat simple. You can enter a general order that says, regardless of what Rule 45 says, everyone has to be in person unless you get permission to appear via Zoom. In our 3rd Street Courthouse, there are 4 judges that make up the law division. 2 of them, Judge Bush and Judge Phoenix, do not allow people to appear via Zoom unless they get special ordered or they request an order and get special appearance allowance in advance. And what that does is, if you've ever been in the courthouse, the only person who has any attention in the morning is Judge Phoenix, because all the lawyers come and talk in his courtroom because he makes them come in, and that gets things done. That gets lawyers to work together. The other thing is to have judges not appear themselves remotely, always be on the bench instead of appearing in their chambers, which is efficient in many ways, but it is non-judicial and really doesn't support the money or time that was spent improving our court system by them not utilizing those services. The other thing is to make it sort of an informal thing. And with this is coming online now, we've moved the jury commission from a very nice space on the 2nd floor at 3rd Street to the 1st floor in a very usable space for them. And the Kane County Bar Association, which I will be at their annual dinner tonight to talk further about this, is going to participate in, and by that I mean pay for, the creation of the Kane County Bar Association's attorney lounge on the 2nd floor to kind of return lawyers to come back in. So one way is to kind of by order, which really isn't very as effective as encouraging people to come back and have a reason to come back to the courthouse. So we're trying to do both of those things. Right. The Judicial Center is filled with lawyers on a regular basis because the state's attorneys and public defenders are in that building and they come down to the courtrooms. Family lawyers come in because we've eliminated emergency motions from appearing on Zoom, so they come to the courthouse more often. But it's the private lawyers at 3rd Street and some other areas that we think we really need to make a change to. So,
Hey, Mr. Roth, did you have a question?
Mine was the same
Okay.
question. So thank you, Judge.
Okay, anything else for our judiciary? Okay. So then we will move on to our public defender.
Good morning. Our reports are on file. Just a couple of things. We are fully staffed, so that is a really good thing. We are fully staffed and everyone is trained. So we have attorneys full staff in all of the courtrooms that we are assigned to. Also, our renovation project that was started back in December that added new offices within our space as well as a conference area. That actually, there was just a few minor things that needed to be cleared up, but it is completely finished as of this month. So we are very excited to have that new space. It looks really nice. You're welcome to come and take a look if you would like. And that's all I have for today.
Any questions for our public defender? I had one. If you can, I don't know how much information you have. The state legislature just passed the Office of Creation of the Public Defender. Can you, if you have any information, can you tell us what that would be and how, what that would mean for the county?
So it does not go into effect until 2027. Actually, it was a budgetary issue, and so they pushed it to 2027. The way that the legislation works is it would give additional resources to public defender offices. It's kind of still in process, the way they're working it out, but especially for downstate counties who cannot become fully staffed, it is the opportunity that attorneys would be sent to them. It gives us the opportunity to get experts in certain areas and help. As I've said before, we have had several years where we've had an influx of murders, the most that we have had in quite some time. So for counties that cannot fully staff those, attorneys would be sent in to help with that. As for the county aspect of it, it is going to, the idea is to give money to counties to supplant their budget. So it would give us additional funds to do things such as experts. And my goal hopefully is to use it to get a social worker for our office. We do not have any information as to how much the amount of money would be. I think it is going to depend on each individual county and the needs of each individual county. It's still very much a work in progress.
I could make some observations on this, if you don't mind, Ms. Conant. The Conference of Chief Judges really disapproves of this legislation. The 25 of us have been working to no avail to convince our Supreme Court to be a better advocate against the creation of this, and they've tried the best that they can. But there are some advocates who are convinced, and I mean advocates on the legislative side, who are convinced that the big problem isn't just funding, when that's a huge problem. We have legal deserts, as our justices like to call them, in certain parts of the state. I have a theory that a lot of that has to do with Zoom, because lawyers don't have to live down there anymore. They can move from where they grew up in a rural area or Southern Illinois. They don't want to live there. They don't have to because they can appear via Zoom. So having a state agency that can help fill that is great. But what's going to happen is twofold. One, nothing a government office creates ever stays inexpensive. As proof of that, Minnesota went from a good faith effort to spend this kind of money on public defenders around the state of Illinois. And I think after 3 years, their budget is $200 million on the state level. So we'll see how that survives. But the most important thing and one relevant thing that you should know is that if I understand the legislation, the advocates for this legislation, one was to make sure that there is opportunity for public defenders to appear where they're most needed. And the other is to remove influence of the circuit judges. In particular, they think it's the chief judge, from making hiring decisions concerning the public defender. So you all may find, as we do, that Ms. Conant is the best public defender that we could have here in Kane County. She's a local person, and a state agency might decide that a new graduate from Loyola Law School is just as good and send them here. I'm not saying that's what they'll do, but that's the fear that a lot of counties have, especially smaller counties or larger counties, where they want to have some influence over who is the public defender and who represents, the most needed criminal defendants in their county. So there'll be more to come on this. I don't know that we're going to have any influence in stopping it. It seems that, or even getting it amended. But I think that'll be the one thing we won't have in the future is influence over who your public defender is.
Thank you for that. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so we will move on to our Court Services Administration. Ms. Ost?
Good morning.
Morning.
My reports are on file. I do want to make a brief note that the problem-solving courts, they have increased their caseloads from about 135 back in December. We're currently holding steady at about 164. That's well within tolerance levels. I'm just super thrilled about that because we like helping people. But that's also an indicator of our DUI court has reached their maximum capacity. The rest of the report also on file. Our caseload numbers are holding steady. There is a slight uptick in crime just because it's summer and we always know that that happens. The other thing I want to point out is that on the financial reports that are in your packet, it does show that we're currently 5% under budget, which works out to be just about $700,000 under budget. Which honestly, that is generally about what we do just because of the size of the department, every turnover, my turnover continues to be high. Unfortunately, people are still leaving to go to other positions that pay more, but then there's a cost savings from the turnover as well as $400,000 for juvenile placement that my pledge to you has always been that we won't spend that money unless we have to. So I always return that. So really that means we're about 300,000 under, but just pointing that out. And then the other thing that I have to talk about is our resolution for psychiatric services for the juvenile detention, if you're ready for that.
Yeah, go ahead and introduce that one.
So we're asked, I will preface this by saying, you know, something like 60% of the kids detained at our juvenile detention facility are on some kind of psychotropic meds. There's more than that that have had a formal diagnosis, but 60% are on some kind of medication. And as you know, we do a lot of evidence-based practices. So we try really hard to get to the root of the problem for these kids and fix what's going on underneath, as it were. So this contract that I'm asking you to authorize us to renew is with Family Counseling Services out of Aurora. They provide us with a psychiatric nurse who comes in and meets with those kids on a weekly basis. They help provide for the prescription medication services, and they also do some mental health care. When we investigated hiring our own psychiatrist, as they're very expensive. Over 10 years ago, we were looking at well over $100,000 a year to have a position like that. But because we're able to partner with Family Counseling Services, they give us a psychiatric nurse. And it's at a much reduced cost. So the cost that we're asking is $60,000 a year. It's already been budgeted. In part, we're going to pay for the $5,000 increase because since the county is entering into an agreement with Blue Cross Blue Shield for mental health services for frontline providers, we're able to piggyback on that because the county's made that countywide. So we'll use the savings from that in part to cover this. So there's no additional funding that we need from the general fund.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve? Mr. Linder moves.
Leonard seconds.
Mr. Leonard seconds. Mr. Leonard, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa, I've got a question for you with respect to changing the contract. You're terminating the existing contract, putting a new one in with Family Counseling Services. Are there any services that we're losing?
No, in fact, the insurance cost for our community service providers has increased substantially, that this is largely at their request because of their increased costs. And this is what we need to do in order to maintain the same level of service.
Right. One other question too. You had mentioned that 60% of the juveniles were diagnosed for psychotropic meds.
Yeah.
But there are more that were diagnosed that aren't on meds. Why is that?
Well, because some diagnoses are things like ADHD, and so they don't necessarily require constant medication, or at least not medication that we have to provide.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, may I please have roll call?
Grape,
Gripe, yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Tepe.
Zeppy, yes.
Did see that Mr. Williams jumped online.
Do I have consent to allow Mr. Williams to vote?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay,
Williams,
He's remote. He's sleeping because he's in.
Mr.
Are you
Williams.
online? Okay,
No, okay, thank you. And Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, this passes on. Okay, let's move on to our circuit clerk.
Good morning, everyone. My monthly report is on file. If anybody has any questions on that.
Any questions for our clerk? Okay.
We are down one clerk. We just lost one. She's moving on for more pay. So that was disappointing. She's been with us for 3 years. We do have 22 employees on 3 years and under. So we try to keep them as long as we can because we have a huge gap now. We used to be, the average was 10 years and now we have, like a third, and a third. So we have pretty well spread out age group in our office. We just finished installing credit card machines in all the courtrooms, which I know the judges were so delighted. But I keep trying to get every dime I can. So, hey, got to do it. So we finished installing the credit card machines on Tuesday, and then the internet went down. So we were a little worried about that. But and I agree with Chief Judge on the Zoom situation. I've been talking about this since we've begun. Zoom is great for those individuals that cannot come to court for job reasons or family reasons, but the reality is the respect for the judicial system is more obtained when they're in a courtroom than through the Zoom, and also financially. It's hard as it is to have someone go to a circuit clerk's office in one of the courthouses and make their payments. And if they're on Zoom, they just never make their payments. So that's something that, I don't think anybody really thought of when we started all this, but it's been a detriment to the financials for us. So that's just something to put in all of your minds. And for KingCom, we do have a huge training room if you would like to use it. I know Court Services have used it before, so just putting that out there. That's all I have.
Okay, any questions for our clerk, Mr. Leonard?
Madam Chair, one comment and then a question either for yourself or the Chief Judge. First of all, on the collections, you're collecting 25% of what you're sending, which is very high. So that's very impressive. Secondly, on the fees that are waived, I'm wondering, is that based on financial? Why are these fees being waived? Because it's a pretty large amount,
It's huge.
188,000.
It's huge. We just had a meeting on this.
So the answer is because we have to. The Supreme Court has decided that there is a threshold, financial threshold. We get a new card every few years about what the minimum line is for whether somebody qualifies for fee waivers. And let me tell you how you would qualify for a fee waiver in front of a judge. You would take a form that says motion for reduction or to waive fees. And there's percentages, 50, 75, 100%. And you would ask for 100% fee waiver, and you would check the box that I have food stamps or I'm on SSI. We cannot ask for backup on that. We can't ask for proof of your financials. We can't ask for anything. As soon as you sign that document, apparently it's an affidavit. I suppose we could go double check it, but nobody does. All those fees are waived. So here's what we were talking about yesterday.
You used to be able to.
We used to, and we used to say, that's nice. You happen to have a very expensive purse and your nails are done. Why can't you afford $150 to go, pay for this fee? But those things I think are not the best way to determine whether or not somebody can afford a fee. So these rules came out and kind of took that authority from a lot of people, from judges in particular. And I think a lot of people are feeling that much more than they expected. I think more people are getting those fee waivers than would have in the past if there was a little bit more scrutiny on these fees. On the other hand, I have been a lawyer for, I'm going to find out tonight, 30 years tonight. Can you believe that?
Wow.
I was graduated law school when I was 14, so it's not that big a deal. But the system that is, in particular, the criminal justice system that we force people to use in order to resolve their disputes should not cause further injury to those people by occasioning large fees on them, especially when you think that the criminal justice system and a lot of other courtrooms are predominantly occupied by people of lower income means. It's just reality. I mean, people with money avoid courtrooms unless they're fighting amongst themselves over a divorce or something like that. They don't care about the fees. But we now have waivers for all small claims, right? Over a certain, what's the other thing that we have waivers for? Adoptions or name changes or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, there's 2 new categories. So, I don't know the answer to that, other than I think there's going to be a critical loss of money in a lot of different counties that's going to request the Supreme Court to make a decision that allows for some kind of review of that. I mean, in some ways, if the fines were less, people wouldn't necessarily qualify for them. So every time we increase fines, we close that gap of between income and fines even more, and makes it easier to waive. So it is a constant concern for a lot of us.
Thank you.
There was just legislation, I believe it was in guardianship. I can't remember, but guardianship, and we were doing the numbers. My CFO was I said, how much will that affect us? And the guesstimate is close to 50,000. And that's the whole county. That's not just, that was just for the general fund, I believe, but she's going to break it down, and I can give you that information next month, but we're trying to determine that.
50,000 for the year?
That was off of 24.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, any old business the committee would like to discuss? Any new business? Okay, I'll entertain a request of consent to place reports on file.
Leonard, so moves.
Okay, no objections. Reports are placed on file. We have no need for executive session. May I have a motion and a second to adjourn?
Linder moves adjournment.
Mr. Linder moves. Is all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.